Discover the incredible night a police chief mistakenly arrested Jesus. Here's what was exposed. Jake Thompson rubbed his temples, the weight of the badge feeling more burdensome by the hour. The memory of that night haunted him, the wrong decision made in the haze of festivity. The artist, Jesus, with his gentle demeanor, should never have been placed in cuffs. How did it come to this? Voices in his head wrestled for dominance, one urging him to uphold the law at all costs, the other whispering doubts about his judgment. Maplewood relied on him. His family's legacy loomed over him like a shadow. Yet beneath the polished surface, uncertainty gnawed at his insides. As he stood in front of the mirror, the reflection staring back was one he scarcely recognized. The chief of police was shrouded in ideals of honor and justice he had lived by, yet now felt like a subdued ghost of the man he once was. The laughter from the church fundraiser lingered in his ears. Friends gathered for portraits, all to witness a significant miscommunication transform into a spectacle of chaos. He had acted hastily, pulled by the tide of the moment, but that didn't erase the consequences of his blunder. He paced the floor, heart pounding with regret. What if the citizens turned their backs on him? What if they saw not the protector, but a man incapable of safeguarding their trust? A quiet storm brewed within him, swirling into an internal tempest that thrashed against the walls of his mind. Was he really the protector, or merely wearing a mask to hide his inadequacies? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can, leave a like. It really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As the day wore on, anger bubbled in the town's cracks, blossoming into confrontation. Jake couldn't ignore it. Accusations flew around like burning embers. He felt it all. The shouts of betrayal, the questions regarding his judgment, tearing at his integrity. How could they question him when he had devoted his life to keeping them safe? Yet, in that relentless scrutiny lay the undeniable truth. He had faltered. Then, the arrival of Sophia forced the tension into a sharper focus. His estranged daughter, a journalist returning home, ripped open old wounds he thought well hidden. Her presence was like a live wire, each confrontation stripping away the facade he had so carefully constructed. "You're part of the problem, Dad," she said, eyes blazing with anger. The challenge was intense. Could he even acknowledge his blind spots? Each conversation they had was laced with frustration, stirring emotions he had buried long ago. He was not only confronted by the weight of the town's views, but also the reality of his own biases. There was no escape from the reflection he saw in Sophia's eyes, holding up a mirror to the man he feared he had become. Each moment swirled back to that night, and the agony of being caught in a nest of ethical dilemmas intensified. Clouds gathered outside, mirroring the struggle within him. What had been a town united in frivolity now turned into a battleground of divided loyalties. As Jake stood on the precipice of revelation, the pressure clawed at his chest, begging for resolution, but leaving only haunting questions swirling in his mind. Could a man steeped in tradition evolve, or would he remain shackled to the past, risking everything, including the bond with his daughter, amid a town on the brink of transformation? The storm approached, and he stood stunned, paralyzed by the fear of what lay ahead. The early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the room. Jake stared at the ceiling, trying to shake off the remnants of sleeplessness. The weight he carried felt almost tangible, as if the very air around him had thickened overnight. Each minute that ticked by only seemed to amplify the anxiety that coiled tighter with each thought. About the town, about Sophia, and about his role in this debacle. He had to act. A decision loomed like a dark cloud overhead. Engagements were necessary. He needed to face the community that now viewed him with suspicion. It was time to stop running from his mistakes. Standing up against the tide of animosity required not just courage, but the willingness to embrace change. What if he used this turmoil as the catalyst for transformation rather than a trigger for chaos? Jake pulled on a crisp shirt and adjusted his badge. He practiced breathing, normalizing the tension that had become a habitual companion. The instinctive fear of exposure was palpable. The trepidation of failure gripped him. But today he would confront it, one step at a time, one conversation at a time. Arriving at the precinct, the atmosphere buzzed with muted chatter, officers exchanging glances filled with questions. Their loyalty to him seemed mixed with uncertainty, and he could feel it. Rather than retreating into his office, Jake stepped into the main room, overseeing the officers in quiet disarray. "Can I have your attention?" His voice cut through the scattered murmurs like a knife. He didn't prepare a speech. Instead, he spoke from the gut. "I made a mistake, one that has repercussions for all of us." An uncomfortable silence enveloped the room, but he pressed on. "I need accountability, not just from the officers below me, but from myself as well." A brave officer, Mike, stepped forward. "Chief, it wasn't just you. It's a systemic issue. We've all let our biases slip in." The words hung heavy. All eyes shifted to Jake, fueling an inner conflict. He struggled against the urge to back down. This was a pivotal moment. What are we going to do about it? About public trust? About breaking these cycles? Mike's challenge unsettled the room. Jake's mind raced. This was not merely about punishment. Transformation required introspection across the board. Let's start by addressing our cultural training, how we respond in ambiguous situations. If we're going to be protectors of this community, we have to learn to walk alongside them, not above them. The response was a mixture of nods and skeptical glances. Sophia's voice rang in his mind. "You're part of the problem." Could he align change with transparency? But the doubts persisted, gnawing at him. After the meeting, he turned his focus toward accountability. He began drafting a proposal for the town's leadership, community forums, transparency initiatives, and a call for open dialogue with the citizens. Could they work together to change the narrative? As he put the pieces together, Sophia walked in, determination shaping her path. "I heard what you said, Dad," she began, eyes kindling with the fire of hope. "You're on the right track, but it's risky. Are you ready to face the fallout?" In that moment, Jake realized that embracing transformative change meant acknowledging the burning ember of anger that had fueled their estrangement. "Risk is the essence of change," he replied, mind swirling with the calamity of the situation ahead. The stakes were high, not just for him, but for the town he loved and the daughter standing before him. The silence that followed was filled with potential and tension as he pondered his next steps. With the future looming ahead, Jake didn't know if he could reclaim the trust he had lost. But it was time to move forward, however treacherous the journey might be. What was lurking beneath the surface of this newfound determination, waiting to challenge his resolve? The afternoon sun hung low, casting an amber glow through Jake's office window. A paper lay crumpled on his desk, the draft proposal still incomplete. He had thought accountability was a noble pursuit, but the magnitude of the task before him began to feel overwhelming. Each line of the proposal transformed into a cliff, revealing the daunting journey he had to undertake to bridge the chasm of distrust that had developed between the precinct and the community. Every word seemed to criticize him, a reflection of external tensions clamoring for change. Did he even believe in the reforms he was drafting? They were rooted in a desire for redemption, but doubt coiled tight in his gut. What if this effort blew up in his face and left him stranded amidst hostility? The familiar grip of anxiety started to claw at him again, but he resisted the impulse to cradle his head in his hands, forcing himself instead to think clearly. As he sat there, Sophia's earlier words echoed in his mind. They weren't just echoes of doubt. They were a spark challenging him to dig deeper into his motivations. He was more than just a police chief. He was a father who had lost touch with his daughter, and a leader who had lost touch with his community. In this moment of reflection, he realized that to understand others, he must first confront the parts of himself he had long ignored. He placed pen to paper, outlining not just the logistics of the proposed forums, but the sentiment behind them: openness, vulnerability, and a genuine attempt to listen. It was a revolutionary shift away from the traditional, rigid approach he'd always rehearsed. He wrestled with the idea of sharing his own failings, allowing people to see the imperfect man behind the badge. But was he ready for that exposure? A knock at the door broke his concentration. It was Mike, the officer whose challenge had spurred this entire endeavor. "Got a minute, Chief?" As Jake nodded, he felt a lingering sense of unease, a supervisor inviting scrutiny. "I was thinking, Chief," Mike began, his tone cautious, "about your idea for the forums. Have you considered who might resist? There are folks out there who'll see this as a weakness rather than a strength." Jake's stomach tightened. "Have you thought about how to convince them otherwise?" Mike's brow furrowed. "I don't think it'll be easy. You know how some of the older officers view change. And your personal history will come into play too, whether you like it or not." Jake steeled himself against the influx of memories, his mistakes, his missteps. He hadn't just failed in handling a situation recently. He had failed in building relationships between the department and the citizens, and perhaps most painfully, between him and Sophia. "Maybe it shouldn't be easy," he replied, feeling a flicker of determination. "People will question you. They'll want answers. You'll need to show them you're serious, that you're willing to stand in the line of fire," Mike said. The words ignited a sense of clarity. This was not just a public relations move. It was an obligation. Laying bare his journey would also ignite conversations about failure, resilience, and most importantly, about forgiveness. Jake looked around his office as if seeing it for the first time. The badges on the wall, the framed photographs of past chiefs, the stark realities of his position. "I need you to help me prepare for that," he said, igniting a plan within the chaos. "What if we armed ourselves with those stories? Let's gather real narratives from the community. Show them the good, the bad, and everything in between." Mike nodded, the skepticism beginning to shift toward resolve. "It's a start, Chief, but I should warn you. When we pull back the curtain, what we find might be even harder to face." Jake knew that each revelation would test his convictions, but this pathway was one he was willing to navigate, however treacherous it may be. As he laid out the framework for gathering those truths, a thrilling reality settled in, one that would demand every ounce of his focus and courage. In that moment, he recognized that the pressure to confront uncomfortable truths, both within himself and in the community, was a stepping stone to reclaiming trust. But could he withstand the potential fallout when those truths emerged? The clock ticked insistently in the background. As Jake prepared for a long night ahead, he realized he had taken a significant step, not just in his leadership, but in his life. The groundwork was laid, but as his next planned conversation loomed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something ominous awaited them. What secrets would the community share, and would he be prepared for the weight of those truths? Jake sat at his desk, the paper in front of him now a blank canvas for his thoughts. The late afternoon sunlight seeped through the blinds, but it felt cold and isolating, casting long shadows that mimicked the weight on his shoulders. He had set the stage for his transformation, yet the questions loomed larger than life. Would he truly rise to the occasion? The proposal on his desk needed clarity. It needed authenticity. He tapped his fingers against the table, contemplating the stories he could gather. Each one would serve as a testament to the community's strength. Stories of hardship and triumph intertwined with bonds broken and mended. But the nagging fear clawed insistently at him. Would they trust him to tell their truths? Picking up the phone, he decided to reach out to the community. He needed insight, real reflections from the heart. The first call was to Mrs. Thompson, an elderly resident he knew had witnessed the precinct's evolving dynamics through turbulent decades. He could feel his heart pounding as the phone rang, each tone echoing his own apprehension. "Hello?" Her voice was soft yet strong. "Mrs. Thompson, it's Chief Harrington," he introduced himself, his voice steady despite the rising tide of anxiety. "I need your help." She laughed, a gentle sound that melted some of his fear. "What can I do for you, Chief?" "We're hoping to gather stories from our community to better understand the connections we've lost," he explained, feeling slightly foolish yet hopeful. "Would you be willing to share your perspective?" "Of course, dear. Just tell me when," she replied, her warmth wrapping around him like a soothing balm. As he hung up, a sense of momentum began to build within him. This was the first step. It was about breaking down the barriers he himself had erected. He was drafting an ode not just to accountability, but to humility. With new energy, he dialed the next number. Carlos, a local business owner whose shop had once been a community hub. The conversations flowed more easily than Jake had anticipated. Each call peeled away layers of his own fear, revealing a deeply rooted desire for connection. He was eager to listen, to absorb the lessons that lay in these stories. Each narrative brought him closer to the vulnerability he had shied away from, prompting him to reflect on his failures not as burdens, but as narratives begging to be understood. As night crept in, the office transformed into a sanctuary of sorts. The weight of doubt began to ease. He felt a new clarity emerging from the chaos. Yet there was a lingering shadow whispering caution. With every story shared, with every revelation, would the community truly be ready for the depth of his own truth? And could he share his missteps without losing credibility? Jake leaned back in his chair, staring at the blank page that was no longer blank in his mind. The contours of his transformation were beginning to form, yet he felt waves of uncertainty crashing against his resolve. Each conversation demanded a new layer of honesty, but what if he was unprepared for the vulnerability it required? Later, he paused to read through the notes he'd taken during the calls, struggling to piece together a coherent framework. His face hardened as he realized those narratives weren't merely scripts, they were cries for understanding. This was not just about him reforming the precinct, it was about facing his own complicity in the disconnection. As he prepared to leave for the night, a message pinged on his phone. Sophia wanted to meet. The weight of that prospect sent his heart racing, intertwining hope with trepidation. Would this meeting be yet another reminder of his failures as a father, or could it be another opportunity for redemption? He stepped into the night, breath visible in the chill air. The streets felt different, almost alive with possibilities, but uncertainty still loomed large. Would he have the courage to confront his daughter and his own past when they finally came face to face? The moment of truth was closer than he had imagined, and he knew nothing would prepare him for what lay ahead. The cold air bit at Jake's cheeks as he hurried down the street, his mind racing with thoughts of the impending meeting with Sophia. Each step felt heavier than the last, laden with the gravity of their past. A knot twisted in his stomach, unrelenting. Would this encounter reveal his inadequacies, or would it be a breakthrough? The darkness of night seeped deeper into his thoughts, intertwining with fragments of memories, older ones bloated with regrets and missed opportunities. Arriving at the cafe, the familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with a hint of baked goods attempted to comfort him, but it was not enough. He spotted Sophia sitting at a corner table, her fingers idly tracing the rim of her cup. Jake's heart quickened at the sight of her. She had changed since he last saw her, yet there remained a striking resemblance, a vivid reminder of the bond they once shared. "Hey," he managed, forcing a smile as he slid into the seat across from her. "Hi," she replied, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Nervous chatter filled the table. Gaps for the first few moments, each mundane exchange adding layers to an already complex atmosphere. Jake noticed how the light caught Sophia's hair. It shone like a beacon of how much time had passed. Was it foolish to pretend there hadn't been years of silence between them? Or might their shared history provide a pathway through the awkwardness? "Dad, I've thought a lot about us," she said, her gaze steady, locking onto his. There it was, the reminder of his role, the weight of his failures as a parent crashing down upon him. "What do you mean?" he asked cautiously. "I mean, about how distant we've been. You chose your job over us." "It hurt," she said, voice tinged with the rawness of unfiltered emotions. The confession shattered Jake, a mirror reflecting his own choices back at him. "I know, I messed up, Sophia." The admission felt hollow, like bandaging a wound that needed stitches. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now how I—" "Lost yourself in the badge?" she interrupted, her tone sharp. The truth behind her words cut deeper than he expected. Each accusation she leveled was a reminder that he never really understood the impact of his dedication on his family. "I didn't lose it. I just didn't know who I was anymore," he confessed, feeling the weight of his identity teeter on the brink. "I thought I could fix things out there, but I've realized I have to start at home." Sophia observed him intently, her expression a mixture of disbelief and fragile hope. "So, what are you going to do now? Just talk about it, or will you actually change?" Her challenge ignited a spark within him. He had spent years trying to manage perceptions, crafting narratives that justified his choices. Yet here was an opportunity to be raw and unadulterated. This was the moment to lay bare his vulnerabilities. "I want to understand you, us. It's time to stop pretending I can hold everything together without confronting the truth. I want to make it right." As the words hung between them, Jake felt the tension begin to dissipate. Yet uncertainty still clawed at the fringes of his mind. Could he truly untangle years of emotional chaos with merely words? Sophia smiled faintly, a glimmer of possibility shining through the shadows. "I want to believe you, but it's going to take more than just promises." The conversation shifted, details of their lives intertwining, awkwardly yet promisingly. With each shared laughter and tentative smile, Jake felt the shards of hope begin to reassemble. Hours slipped by as they feasted on memories, moments of pain transformed into opportunities for rebuilding. But as he looked into her eyes, a question nagged at him. If the challenge lay before him, would he risk everything he had built to save this relationship? With the cafe growing quieter, the weight of whispered questions lingered. He knew one thing: the next step would demand more honesty and courage than he had ever shown before. Yet uncertainty remained. What awaited him if he peeled back the layers of his identity, revealing the man beneath the shield? Would the truth set him free, or would it push him further into isolation? It was time to confront those demons, a reckoning for both the father and the chief. But first, Jake had another call to make, one that could bridge yet another chasm in his life. He had to reckon with the hardest truth of all, the reality of his own expectations. Would the reflection he saw finally align with the man he aspired to become? Jake stepped out of the cafe, the night air still prickly against his skin, but this time it felt different. The conversation with Sophia had done more than stir up old emotions. It had ignited a dormant fuel within him, pushing him to confront not just his past relationship with her, but his entire approach to life. He allowed the cool breeze to fill his lungs, each breath a reminder of the clarity he sought. As he walked, the vibrant city buzzed around him, oblivious to the crucible of personal change he was experiencing. The streetlights flickered above, casting shadows that danced along the pavement, a metaphor for the struggle between light and dark in his own life. There was an irony in his role as the chief of police. He had spent so long seeking justice in the public realm while neglecting the deeper injustices of his own heart. He took out his phone, hesitating for a moment before dialing an old partner from his precinct, Harris. They had been through thick and thin, but this conversation required an admission of vulnerability that made Jake's palms sweat. "Harris," he said when his partner picked up, trying to keep his voice steady. "I need to talk." "Jake, is something wrong? You sound off." The concern in Harris's voice resonated with Jake, a reminder of the camaraderie he had sidelined. "It's about a case," Jake began, feeling the weight of his words. "No, it's more like a reckoning involving me and the department." "A personal problem or a work-related one?" Harris asked, his tone shifting towards caution. "Both, I guess. I've been doing some serious thinking after a meeting with Sophia today. I realized how far I strayed from being who I want to be." The admission hung in the air, palpable yet daunting. "Okay, are you talking about the job? What do you mean?" Harris prodded gently, sensing the gravity of the moment. "I've been hiding behind it, using it as a shield. I focused on being the chief rather than the father, the man I want to be. I have to change, not just for Sophia, but for myself. I want to be better, more authentic, but I don't know where to start." Jake could hear Harris exhaling slowly. "Change is hard, Jake. It's easier to wear the badge than to face the truth, right? But you're not alone in this. Would you be willing to help? I could use some guidance navigating my way back to myself." Silence presided on the line for a moment. "Absolutely. But you'll have to be ready to face the consequences. It won't be easy. I've accepted that. I messed up my family. I don't want to mess up at work as well. I don't want to lose myself while trying to save the world." "All right," Harris replied, a sense of resolution in his voice. "Let's meet tomorrow morning. We'll go over pending cases and see where you can make a real impact. You've still got it in you, Jake. Just don't let it slip away." With resolve kindling in his chest, Jake hung up the phone. The weight that had settled on him seemed a little lighter now. Planning for tomorrow's meeting felt hopeful, a structured step toward both personal and professional development. What could he do differently? How could he mold the position to serve the man he aspired to be? As he continued home, his mind raced, contemplating the aspects of his role as the chief, the encounters he had with the community, the tough decisions that shaped the law enforcement landscape. All these moments could evolve. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of his effort to reclaim the integrity he had overshadowed with ambition. But just as a flicker of clarity washed over him, another thought crept in. What if the road he sought led to confrontations, not just with his past, but with entrenched enemies of his own making within the department? Jake took a deep breath, resolved to find a balance in his ambitions. The road before him seemed winding, the choices murky, but he knew he was ready. The challenge wasn't just in rediscovering himself, but in navigating the insidious power dynamics that defined his position. How would he break down the barriers shaped by years of focusing solely on the badge? With that thought lingering, he stepped into his home, determined to confront the truths that awaited him there. Jake awoke the next morning with a sense of purpose that thrummed in his chest, nearly electrifying. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the small details of his room. The worn leather chair that had been a silent witness to late-night reflections. The pile of unsorted papers on his desk that mirrored the chaos in his mind. Today felt different, a threshold he was poised to cross. He allowed the warmth of the day to energize him, fueling his resolve to confront both himself and the department head-on. As he prepared for his meeting with Harris, he turned his thoughts inward. What does authenticity really mean for him? Was it as simple as being honest about his struggles with his past, or owning up to his current failures as a father, as a friend, and as a leader? The nuances of this journey began to swirl in his mind, blending doubt with determination. He envisioned the possibility of shedding the impenetrable armor of his badge and revealing the man beneath, the one who was not just an enforcer of laws, but an individual capable of compassion and understanding. He arrived early at the precinct, the familiar structure standing stark against the sky, a fortress filled with its own hidden battles. As he walked through the bustling halls, he noticed the dynamic within the department more acutely than ever. His colleagues moved with an air of routine, but Jake sensed a slumbering unrest, a tension that echoed his own internal struggles. It was as if the walls had absorbed years of unspoken dissatisfaction, a palpable reminder of the sacrifices made at the altar of ambition. Harris was already waiting in the conference room, his expression contemplative. "You look ready," he remarked, offering a knowing glance. Jake nodded, though the knot in his stomach betrayed his uncertainty. "Let's dive in," Jake prompted, the weight of his role suddenly very tangible. They reviewed open cases, but time seemed to blur. The work felt secondary to what he ultimately needed to address. "What's really on your mind?" Harris asked, breaking the rhythm. Jake hesitated before leaning back in his chair, gathering his thoughts. "For too long, I've focused on being the chief, living up to expectations and making decisions that resonate with authority instead of accountability. I've ignored the human side of this job." The admission felt liberating, yet terrifying. Harris nodded thoughtfully. "That's a healthy realization, but to act on it, you'll need to back it up with decisions that might rattle the establishment. Are you ready for that?" Jake's pulse quickened. Harris was right. It wasn't just about introspection. It was about taking concrete actions that could upend the status quo. Though he yearned for change, the idea of confronting possibly entrenched negativity within the department ignited a mixture of fear and excitement. What if confronting the department means stepping on toes, especially those of some officers who enjoy their traditions? "You have to weigh the cost of complacency against the benefits of authenticity," Harris replied, his tone steady. "Remember, change isn't just disruptive, it's necessary for growth." With each word, Jake felt the resolve crystallize within him. He'd been hiding from the uncomfortable conversations, the necessary confrontations. Why not begin with his closest allies? Could he risk transforming the department without first transforming his immediate circle? Jake pulled out a legal pad and began jotting down a plan. Weekly team meetings, open forums for suggestions, and perhaps a candid discussion about the department's culture. Each stroke of the pen outlined the shape of a new path forward, one where he'd lead from the front rather than from behind the badge. But as his heart raced with fervor, a disquieting thought struck. Would they accept a different kind of leader? Would they challenge him or rally behind a vision that could shatter years of established norms? As he shared his preliminary ideas with Harris, doubt crept in, as shadows lengthened around them. The stakes were huge.
High, both personally and professionally. How would he navigate this potential storm? Jake pushed the worry to the side, focusing on a vision that could redefine his leadership. The journey had just begun, and he couldn't turn back now. He would have to summon the courage to face the inevitable backlash that might follow. With a deep resolve resonating within, he thought eagerly about the next steps. Tomorrow, he would lay out his plan before the team. Would they embrace the challenge or resist the change? The moment of truth approached, and Jake felt the tension coil tighter within him as he prepared to ignite a transformation that could either elevate his department to new heights or plunge it into chaos. The following day began with a sense of urgency that coursed through Jake's veins. He stood in front of the mirror, practicing his posture, his expressions, the gravity of his words. Each repetition echoed in the caverns of his mind, amplifying the internal dialogue, questioning whether he was ready. This was no mere departmental meeting. It was a stepping stone toward reshaping not only his career, but also his identity as a leader. Upon arriving at the precinct, the buzz of the morning felt different. The murmurs of officers catching up on overnight shifts took on a heavier context. To them, the routine might have seemed mundane, but Jake could feel the undercurrents of skepticism swirling in the air. He took a deep breath, grounding himself as he walked past his colleagues, hoping for support but expecting resistance. In the conference room, the table was set with a mix of apprehensive faces. Harris was present, offering a nod of encouragement. The tension felt thick. Jake could almost taste it. He opened his legal pad and began outlining his vision with a steady voice that he hoped would mask the quiver within. "Today, I want to initiate a shift in how we operate," he stated, projecting confidence despite the weight of their gazes. "Our department has become stagnant, bound by tradition. It's time for us to foster an environment of transparency and accountability." He scanned the room, waiting for reactions. A murmur rippled through the group. A few officers exchanged glances, some nodding slowly, while others frowned in disapproval. "Jake," one of the seasoned officers interrupted, arms crossed, "you're talking about changing decades of practice. Are we really ready for that?" The question hung in the air like an electric charge. Jake's instinct was to defend, to rationalize the need for evolution, but he paused instead. He needed to embrace the challenge, and part of that meant embracing doubts too. Change is uncomfortable, I understand that. But how many times have we seen camaraderie crumble because we prioritize the badge over trust? The community needs us to embody values beyond enforcement. We must become leaders. I want open conversation. I want us to share ideas on how we can be the department the public believes we can be. A silence enveloped the room, plunging Jake into a moment of introspection. For years, he had enforced discipline, but as he spoke, another reflection begged for recognition. Could he lead with vulnerability? Would they want to follow someone bearing their own struggles and fears? A younger officer raised a hand. What about those who might resist? How do we address their concerns without losing sight of the goal? Jake felt the rising tide of anxiety swirl again, but recognized this as an opportunity. We address them together. I propose that every voice, every concern becomes part of our plan. Let's create forums and make ourselves accessible for discussions. Everyone needs to feel seen in this change. It's not just about me or the higher-ups. It's about all of us collaborating for improvement. The room remained silent, but the gears began to grind as curiosity peaked. He saw nods of agreement from some officers, while others still bore skepticism. There was a crack, a small one, but a crack nonetheless. The team was beginning to think, to engage. As the meeting progressed, each member offered thoughts, fears, and suggestions. Although resistance bubbled beneath the surface, there were sparks of hope and opportunity. There were even rare moments of candid laughter that broke the ice. By the time they wrapped up, Jake felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. The heavy burden of reality crashed upon him. He was committed to this path, opening up a door that couldn't be closed without facing the backlash. In the parking lot afterward, the sunlight felt sharper, clearer. He wondered if the small victories of today would quell the storms of opposition that might come. As he pulled out his phone to text Harris about the next steps, his eye caught a flash of movement. A group of officers stood huddled, whispering, and shooting glances towards him like sharp arrows of judgment. A twist in his stomach signaled deeper turmoil. Was this just the beginning of resistance, or could it bloom into something greater, change that would truly embrace both the badge and the man behind it? The road ahead held uncertainty, and with that uncertainty came a pressing decision. How would he prepare for the inevitable challenges? Tomorrow would unveil the first wave of reactions to his approach, and with it came the relentless questioning of whether true leadership was worth risking everything he'd built. The morning sun broke through the horizon, casting a warm glow over the precinct. Yet the atmosphere inside the station felt charged, each officer wrapped in a blanket of tension that was palpable. Jake leaned against his desk, flipping through notes from the meeting. The fragmented pieces of their discussions floated in his mind like leaves in a tempest, some swirling with hope, others weighed down by doubt. His phone buzzed, breaking his reverie. It was Harris, a brief message urging Jake to meet before the squad briefing. Jake felt a tremor of anticipation and apprehension. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. As
he stepped into Harris's office, he found his mentor buried in paperwork, but the man looked up with a knowing smile. "You did well yesterday, Jake," he said, gesturing for Jake to take a seat. "But I sense the aftershocks are just beginning." Jake ran a hand through his hair. "I felt the resistance, Harris. They might change their minds, but they sure won't do it quietly." His frustration bubbled beneath his composed exterior. "What if I'm not cut out for this? What if they never buy in?" Harris leaned back, resting his elbows on the desk. "Leadership isn't a straight path, Jake. It's about endurance. You have to anticipate the pushback. You need to plan for it. Think of alternatives, strategies to engage the skeptics. If you truly want transformation, you've got to learn to embrace the friction." Taking in Harris's words shook something loose in Jake's mind, a mix of discomfort and determination. He realized he needed to shift from mere defense to proactive strategy. "I have to confront this head-on, don't I?" "Absolutely. Address their doubts before they become obstacles. Prepare a follow-up. Reinforce your commitment to collaboration and transparency." Harris's voice had an urgency to it, fueling Jake's determination. With a nod, he became aware of the tightrope he walked. Every decision would either cement his role or land him in the crosshairs of discord. After their discussion, he left the office reinvigorated. He planned to create forums where officers could voice their concerns openly. The time had come for him to confront not just their doubts, but his own insecurities as a leader. At the squad briefing, the atmosphere was tense, like the calm before a storm. Officers shuffled in, their expressions revealing a spectrum of acceptance and resistance. Jake took a deep breath, standing firm in front of the group. "I want to build a soundboard, a place where we can openly discuss our plans and concerns. I recognize that transitions create uncertainty. Let's talk about it together." The officers shifted in their seats, uncertainty hanging thick in the air. One officer raised a skeptical eyebrow, crossing his arms. "What makes you think we would even be interested in sharing our opinions, Jake? Some of us have been in this department long enough to see plans come and go." His challenge struck a nerve, and Jake felt the weight of the room pressing down on him. "I understand your hesitation, but this isn't just about policy changes. It's about healing divisions that have formed, not just within our team, but with the community. Your voices matter, and I want you to have a stake in how we shape our future." A murmur of interest fluttered through the room, catching Jake off guard. A few officers shifted closer, curiosity igniting in their eyes. He pressed on, eager to seize the moment. "Let's create an environment where we grow together. I need your insights, your criticisms. Help me understand what we can do better." As the meeting progressed, Jake felt an unfamiliar sense of hope begin to simmer beneath the surface of doubt. His colleagues gradually engaged, sharing ideas and frustrations.
breathing life into the static atmosphere. Yet, despite the emerging dialogue, Jake's thoughts lingered on a single question. Was this newfound openness a genuine sign of progress, or simply a facade masking deeper resistance? As the meeting adjourned, he couldn't shake the feeling of impending challenges. Stepping out of the precinct under the clear blue sky, he felt a glimmer of satisfaction. He had taken the first steps towards change, but the reality was stark. With every step forward, scrutiny would increase. What lay ahead remained veiled in uncertainty, tightening like a noose around his ambitions. Tomorrow, he would face the true test of his leadership. Would his colleagues continue the dialogue after the initial conversations? Or would their resistance mount, creating insurmountable barriers to his vision? In his gut, Jake knew the answer would soon unfold, dragging him deeper into the complexities of what it truly meant to lead amidst dissent. With the dawn of a new day, Jake Thompson stood at the edge of a new chapter, bolstered by resolve, yet under the weight of uncertainty. He gathered courage and chose to embrace the challenges ahead, fully aware that transformation required not only a shift in practices, but also in perceptions, both his and those around him. The precinct buzzed with a palpable tension as officers gathered for the follow-up forum he had promised. Jake sensed the unease, knowing that he was now navigating the treacherous waters of truth and vulnerability. Today wasn't just about rolling out new policies, it was about connecting with his team and unearthing layers of their shared experiences. The stakes had never been higher. As he walked into the room, the familiar faces of his colleagues turned towards him, their expressions a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "Thank you for joining me today," he began, conscious of the shifting dynamics in the air. "I want to create a space for each of you to voice your thoughts freely. I want to hear your stories, your frustrations. We need to build trust together." His words hung in the air, waiting to find roots or fall flat. A silence filled the room, but anxiety turned into tentative murmurs as one officer, a veteran named Linda, spoke up. "Chief, we've seen a lot of plans come and go. What makes you think this time will be different?" Jake regarded Linda, her question not just challenging, but necessary. "Because I'm not here to dictate what we could or should be. I'm here to facilitate a conversation. Each one of you has invaluable insights." He paused, letting his vulnerability linger. "I've stumbled before, and I want to acknowledge that. Today, I'm choosing to learn from you." Gradually, the tension began to dissolve. Other officers shared their thoughts, emphasizing their desire for a more community-oriented approach. Stories of missed opportunities and confrontations with citizens flooded the discussion, and with them, Jake felt the weight of their shared experiences, each one a testament to the realities they face daily. "Listen," Jake encouraged, "we cannot improve without recognizing where we've fallen short, but it has to start with us being honest with each other." He could feel the atmosphere shift, subtle but palpable. It was no longer just his vision, it was growing into a collective aspiration. By the end of the session, Jake felt transformed. What had started as a meeting filled with doubt had morphed into an invigorating dialogue alive with possibility. The resistance he feared had begun to crumble, replaced by a burgeoning camaraderie. It was the first time in a long while that he felt a genuine bond with his team, one that transcended rank and title. However, the progress wasn't without its challenges. He faced stern critiques about certain cases and decisions made during his tenure, each question a nudge toward reflection. But instead of retreating, he welcomed the scrutiny, recognizing it as fuel for further growth. At that moment, he understood that true leadership lay not in evasion, but in embracing the discomfort and learning from each encounter. As Jake left the precinct, a mix of triumph and responsibility filled his spirit. He had catalyzed a dynamic change within his department, yet he knew the real work lay ahead. Would the newfound principles take root and inspire real transformation in policing? Or would they become just another fleeting initiative? Still uncertain, he was nevertheless reignited with determination. He was no longer just a chief.
He was also a father, a mentor, and a leader committed to authentic change. Each conversation, each encounter would build the foundation of a legacy that was now emerging. Returning home, he found Sophia waiting for him, her expression tentative, yet filled with a flicker of hope. "How did it go today?" she asked. Jake met her eyes, feeling a swell of pride mixed with vulnerability. "It was eye-opening. We discussed our shortcomings, and I believe we're on a path toward real change." Sophia smiled, her trust in him flickering back to life. "You're finally stepping up, Dad. I'm proud of you." In that moment, the connection deepened, the distance created by years of neglect slowly eroding. Jake felt the profound satisfaction of having chosen to confront his fears, the badge, and the past. He had achieved something tangible today, the birth of accountability and strength through vulnerability. No longer just a protector of the law, he was taking steps to become a guardian of change within himself and the community. As the sun set on a day filled with progress, Jake Thompson emerged not only as the chief of police, but as a man undeterred in his pursuit of growth, readiness to embrace whatever came next. He welcomed the path ahead with open arms, resolved to blaze a trail toward meaningful transformation and connection, both with his colleagues and his daughter. It was a moment of clarity that ignited a fierce determination to not only be better, but to stand firm in the pursuit of integrity and hope. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.